We'll go through the usual procedure.
Introduction?
Yeah, I think we all know each other.
At the end of the meeting,
We're at the stage, I think, as I do with my students, to say, tell us all something that not many other people know about you.
We don't, we all, there are things we all don't want to know about each other.
Who speaks Romanian?
All right, so calling the meeting to order at 7 o'clock and 12 seconds. So I see a lot of stuff there. Who wants to say something?
So I'll start out real briefly. The back continuation of the previous meeting. We took under advisement all the suggestions you folks made, and so there are some upgrades there. So we'd like to talk to those, speak to those, see if we can't get approval on it's 4 lots.
Okay.
4-lot conventional subdivision, and then we have other questions after that.
Okay. So this is the first that, this is the first we're going to be seeing this.
So is all the stuff we have for the 5 lots now, we just throw it away?
Sure.
Is there anything we want to salvage out of here, the old package?
I don't think we need to keep anything. I think everything's being replaced with
So, all the old stuff is,
So you, like, there's a wetlands, yeah, I guess you did. Yeah, okay.
new. Just kind of resubmitted everything, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
so is this a miniature of this, or is this?
Well, the color ones, we just did an 11 by 17, which is more flatter, but the rest of it is full size. So there's the subdivision plan and there's a road plan profile in full size.
Okay, so this is just like a new version or the same version of what we had last
The
time?
conservation easement exhibits, yeah.
Is the same as last time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing's
So
changed.
we'll just have an extra still.
Actually,
All right. So, anything you want to tell us?
You know, we had gone through the checklist last time.
Right.
We've tried to address everything that you requested. We have, one of the big things is we have tested data for all 4 lots. We provided a plan and profile of grading for the road. We reduced the length of the road, 1,200 feet to the end of the cul-de-sac as you guys requested. And then we looked at modifying all the lots so that we have, you know, a developable area. That was one issue on lot 3, which led us to back to 4 lots. So we couldn't get it to work with 4-to-1 ratios and the effective lot areas and trying to keep away from steep slopes with all of them. We couldn't quite get it to work. So we have 4 lots, all of them with plenty of effective area.
Is there a table like you had in the old package? Is that in this big thing?
There
Or-
is.
Okay.
Oh,
so-
well, not in the plans,
No.
I think it's an attachment here.
Oh, you see the narrative that's in attachment?
okay, there was some extra copies in there, and I can go make copies of those.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Let me go make copies of those. I can.
Should be,
Must be on.
yeah, I have a single one, I gave you the first one, please.
I have it in my office, so.
Is this what we're doing? Or are you gonna have it upside down? I can't read it.
4. Yeah.
Yeah, let me, I'm gonna make a whole copy of it.
All right.
The other thing that we adjusted in the calculations was we were trying to do a weighted average with the 1,000-foot line, and so David had said basically we can't do that, so essentially we have one lot that is a 3-acre lot, the remainder.
This one here?
Southwest.
Right,
corner.
yeah, correct,
Okay.
and then the rest of them are 5-acre lots.
Okay.
We've also provided conceptual layout for driveways and building locations. The driveways, we propose to do 2 shared driveways, so we'll have an impact on the conservation easement areas. I'd also like to provide,
Why do you even need the cul-de-sac?
well, for fire and emergency to turn around, or just any vehicle to turn around if they get to the end of it. Typically, we either provide a hammerhead or a cul-de-sac at the end. I have this one as well, because I realized in the exhibits, we didn't really have an overall that showed the lots and the driveways and the
Oh, right.
conservation
Oh,
easements.
good,
So that,
okay, that
that's what
helps.
we have there.
Thank you.
Terrific.
So you'll see on the shared driveway for the lower 2 lots, lots 1 and 2, we've stayed outside the wetland buffer with that and impacting some of the agricultural soils. On the lot 3 and 4, the upper 2, we did impact the wetland buffer area, but stayed out of the steep slopes with those, so. The 4K areas have been placed, we try to utilize test pit data that we already had, so that's kind of how those ended up there. We did provide test pit logs that were prepared by Fuss and O'Neill previously in these locations, so.
In the same location?
In the locations we're proposing now.
In the same ones?
Correct.
So it looks like 3 of the 4 septics are on local ag soil, and then the other one is in just a little bit of it is in the national and statewide.
Right, and I suppose that one can be maybe shrunk a little bit,
They're
but
shaped in a different way so that it could get out of that, but
Yeah.
whatever, yeah. You've got other white spaces there.
yeah, when I was looking at the septic, it seemed like the emphasis on the septic setbacks was to stay out of the 100-foot wetland buffer,
Mhm.
which we've done.
Yep.
The other thing that is modified from the previous plan is the location of the access point on Route 10.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The location of the access point on Route 10.
Yeah.
We looked at the driveway permit that was previously approved, and the DOT approved essentially a shared driveway at the current location, so it was a change in use, but the driveway was to be in the current location, so that's how we have it now. Previously, we had it kind of coming,
So this is on the other property?
correct, and there's an easement that was deeded as part of that original subdivision for that access. And it's on the boundary plan that we provided as well.
Okay, but that's a different driveway than the lodge uses?
No, that's the driveway.
It's the same one?
uses. It's just showing basically an improved road that would be used. And then the lodge driveway would continue to peel off and go up the hill the way it does now.
So is there enough room for this road with the barn being there?
It does get by the barn.
Well,
It goes through, I think, one of the smaller buildings at the barn.
yeah, one of the other buildings is there.
Yeah, so it goes past the barn and then goes to the right. Right after the-
It kind of takes right before we get to the barn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see the driveway that goes around the side of the barn, so it's sort of.
Right, I think on the bigger plan, you'll probably see a little better.
Yeah.
To it. So we show ditching down each side of the road on the plan profile. as well as a proposed pond area towards the bottom there. And we outlined that as an easement area if needed for, potential recorded plan, but I know you guys had mentioned you wanted to see, easement locations. We also, because of the grading of the road in places, we needed a couple of short sections of slope easement, so we've shown those as well.
So you haven't really shown the grading for the pond.
We did. We showed a conceptual area of
Just
the
an area.
location, where it would go. I think it's feasible to go there. We showed culvert going under the road. That would pick up the vast majority of that road.
Mhm.
And then to discharge into the wetland that gets across the road.
And, okay, so that's out of all the jurisdictional wetlands, the,
Yeah, and you can see the delineated areas, yeah. That's-
well, I didn't know with all with the grading you might need to do, are you out of the, I mean, you're out of jurisdictional wetlands.
Right,
The
well, I think,
grading, this is conceptual.
right, I mean, I think we could do it, I guess. I guess when we talked before, we said we would highlight a location and not necessarily design a pond.
Okay.
So we haven't done test pits, I guess we have to, right, if we wanted to go to final design, but I think that's a reasonable area for what we're talking about here. It's not a lot of road.
And then that would overflow into the wetland that's there.
Right, so we'd be knocking down the peak rates and probably discharging with a small orifice that would discharge over a day or so, basically, would be the model. And during large storm events, potentially, we probably would have an emergency spillway.
What did you ask?
If you flip to the next page, I think.
Next page.
Yeah.
So,
Zoom in.
Yeah, this is it.
That's it.
Where?
That's it.
The circle?
The stormwater detention?
shows better on this.
Yeah, so the next
The
page.
next
that's
page.
it.
Put it over. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, keep going, yeah.
Says here?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
Road profile is a maximum of 10%. And we showed the cul-de-sac area at about 5%, just flatten it out so it's not as steep.
All right, so is there more you'd like to say?
I think what we'd like to do is see if you guys can approve the four lot conventional subdivision and then we have some questions after that, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Board members, any questions?
well, so where would the fire cistern go?
We would put it under the cul-de-sac, and I reached out to the fire chief a couple of times, I wasn't able to get in touch with him. So I put a note on the plan basically that says, we would design a cistern that would be compliant with his requirements as well as an FPA. We didn't design it per se, but that could be done during a construction plan.
So there'd be a hydrant somewhere around this cul-de-sac?
Right, so typically, yeah, you would have the cistern would be underground, and you'd come to the side with a hydrant.
And what's the distance from where that hydrant would be to the potential house sites that are, well, especially the first one here? Don't we have a length between the hydrant? We're supposed to have the fire protection X number of feet from where the house site is, and I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's in our.
Pond might be close.
They're about 500 feet as the crow flies, the way that we have it laid out now.
But, okay, so they're not gonna go overland, most likely they would go along the road, and so just wondering, because I think it's in our regulations what that is. The fire protection's on page 41 of the subdivision regulations. Okay, the content of the pond. Okay, so not less than 14,000 gallons, is that the, you can put that underneath there?
Yes, that's a big cistern, but,
Oh, I
that's a
know.
big cul-de-sac too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it would need to be 4 feet under and then be that volume.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's feasible. What, is there anything in here about the distance to
I
the homes?
felt that we were supposed to have, the water supply for each resident shall be installed prior to the development of the third lot in the case of the minor subdivision water leak. Okay. I thought there was something about it needed to be no further than how much ever hose we had or something like that. But let's just see here. Maybe that's gone since I've been here. I don't see a distance.
Yeah, they have a lot of hoses. They go up there, maximum hoses.
Does anybody know how much hose? About?
They can normally do a 1,200-foot run.
So they could come in and go up somebody's driveway. I mean, is that a possibility?
So it looks like we're about 550 feet down the road, and then go back up to the
Up the
home,
shared driveway?
Up the shared driveway, which is, looks like about another 600, so we're, yeah, we're right at 1,100.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good number.
Plus, I've done some maps for the fire chief, and we were doing, the area 1,200 feet around their dry hydrants to see where, the distance that they could lay a hose, so that's.
So it does talk about access in B1, and it says that there needs to be a service road allow for sufficient turnaround and have no grade steeper than 8%.
So do we have that?
Yeah, that's a cul-de-sac. That's what
Yeah,
you have in
I
the
don't know.
cul-de-sac.
No, the access road is supposed to, I think, connect the like, main road to the pond or hydrant.
Cistern or hydrant.
Right, and this is right in the middle of the road, so I think we're fine, even though some of these sections of the road are 10%. It's just for, like, if the pond were over here, they might have to have an access road, and that thing can be no steeper than 8% is what that says.
Okay, so are we satisfied with that, or do we have more questions?
The proposed pond potential, is that just a rain retention pond, or is that gonna be a water?
It would
Constant.
probably be either an infiltration basin or a wet pond, depending on what the test pit's found. Right, so if we had shallow water table, which I would imagine we do here, it would probably be a wet pond design, so it would be designed to be set below the seasonal high water table, and it would hold water basically.
I'm just curious how much water that would hold.
Oh, probably not enough.
You don't
Yeah,
wanna
it
get
would-
into
yeah.
excavating close to the root and wetland.
It's supposed to be about 8 feet deep, right?
Well, no, he's got a volume consideration, because it's supposed to be, the pond shall be not less than 25,000 gallons of usable water and not less than 10,000 gallons per lot. So we need to have 40,000 gallons.
Well, he's got this cistern here, but what I'm looking
Oh.
at is this just servicing 2 houses. If there was another hydrant in
I
that
see.
pond, that would service the lower two, get you away from your distance, and
Right,
serves,
I see.
that's the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like we have less than 1,200 feet from the
Yeah.
cul-de-sac to the farthest home, so I think that would work. I don't know, I wouldn't wanna rely on a stormwater pond for fire protection, I don't think. Cause it's just, it wouldn't be designed for that. I mean, I suppose it could be designed for that, but I'm not sure that there's enough area there for that big of that much volume.
How,
The only other thing I look at is if there was any resource there at all for water, it also serves the other property, but just right next door.
Well,
That's a bigger fire hazard to me.
as the pond, how does it slope off from the shore? How deep does it get, or is it fairly shallow as it goes out, or does it drop off? Because,
The pond level.
The bottom of the pond.
yeah, the bottom of the pond.
Can you jump in right off the edge, or can you walk in?
Yeah, you can walk in, it probably goes to, this height, five-ish feet, and then it does drop off.
Because the other, thought is that somewhere along where the pond cuts in, it might be on your property, I don't know exactly whether, a dry hydrant on that side would be certainly useful for.
We'll put that on the list of other things that we've got.
Okay, do you have any follow-ups on that, or do I get a chance here?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to get a general sense of, like at high season at the lodge, and then with four, four residences, what would be the general traffic? Do you have a sense of that?
The data that
I have some old stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when we came to the zoning board, before I say a number, I try to remember if I imagined that. I do know when we came to the zoning board and we told them we were gonna have 36 people, 36 homes there back in that proposal. We asked the state DOT, do we need a traffic study? And they said, no.
They weren't.
I mean, they were completely uninterested in that, 36 people, 36 families, times what, 5 trips a day, on Route 10, just
Wasn't a concern.
wasn't a concern.
Okay.
So, I think the traffic we have
So, 4 houses would be less of a concern.
would be.
1/9 less of a concern.
At least, yes, right.
Okay. Well, I'll just say that on first look, these look like nice plans. It's just really difficult just getting them to definitively know everything that's in here.
Turn page.
There it is. Roadway.
wetland crossing that you had requested, the culvert crossing. Obviously not site specific, but general idea.
Yeah, maybe we trust all this.
But this is the new one, these are with the 4 lots.
This is the required. So there, this was
I guess, I have a question for the board, which is, are we gonna go through this, study this here, like in study hall for a half hour, an hour? Or, how do you want to proceed?
For me, I mean, it's really hard to, I haven't reviewed
Yeah,
this,
that's
so
what I'm getting
I
at.
can't like say, oh, I've done a good job reviewing this and I can approve it, so that's the, let's see, bad thing about getting at this.
Right. On first look at, I really like what you did here, and it really provides good information. It's just really hard to, having just looked at it, to sit here and go, yeah, well, we can go through this whole thing and know what our questions will be. Normally, we would have time to study this at home.
So,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, well, when you did all the square footage, well, you got that from the map, how do you get that from the map?
Right, so
You
we
don't
have.
go out on the ground and measure all that with a 100-foot tape, so.
No, I mean, the calculations for the effective lot area, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
right over.
So we have,
After you take the overlays away and all that.
right, so, it's all in AutoCAD, so it's a program that allows us to digitize all of this data and take all the measurements in CAD, and we've got, so all these conservation easements are, hashes in our program, and then we can basically clip them at the lot lines,
Right.
and then that's how we.
So the computer really tells you what it is, what the square footage is.
Well, the computer helps us figure out the areas for the different buffers, and then we enter them into our spreadsheet, which we've set up to basically comply with your ordinance, which is, we start by excluding all the wetlands, 100%
Right,
are gone, and then we work with, wetland buffers, and then steep slopes, and, we make sure not to duplicate those
Right.
exclusions, and, yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, because I'm not that familiar with how it works, and David knows how it works, so. But yeah, I just was curious how it's
I'm
done.
not sure how a person would do it if they didn't have some pretty sophisticated software.
Well, about spending hours with 100-foot tape.
I don't,
that would be-
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I use ArcGIS myself.
yeah. So, and David, you're satisfied with all the,
I got this yesterday also, I have not had a
Yeah,
chance
I
to
mean, I
go
think
through
that's-
it and
that's-
review it, so I can't,
I think that's
won't
something
say
we
either
need,
way.
we need to address, the board needs to address.
yeah, I'm sure it's fine, but,
Well, the problem is that, you know, just having gotten this, this is a lot of information, and I can't see how I could make, you know, my personal decision tonight unless we just stayed here all night studying. So, I don't know, how does the rest of the board feel?
I feel similar in normal, we ordinarily have David fact check these kinds of things.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, so I definitely would, I definitely would like to have David, not try to reproduce these numbers, but, do a thorough.
I mean, I don't have
Yeah.
the base data to do
No,
the
but
actual
you-
calc, but I
but
look
you-
at those and I
you
can
can
say
get a good
whether
sense.
they make sense or if they're,
That's why I said sniff test.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanna be clear about that, I can't,
Yeah,
it's not, no, it's just your input. So, I think we're gonna need David's input, and I think everybody's gonna need a chance to actually study these. So, what is the board's thought on how to proceed?
Well, I think we should continue it, but I wonder, since the applicants are having a hard time getting in touch with the fire chief, can you ask Kinsley what he thinks? Or, sorry, Mike Mundy what he thinks?
yep.
I think he was away this week,
He was.
so.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
away all week.
so, I think they went on vacation, the office is closed, and,
Right, I called here, and then they
Um,
basically said they were gonna give him my contact information and things.
We know he's away, well, because he's our chiropractor. So our schedule.
The whole board.
Board's walking around like
he
this.
looks a little bit like we're out of alignment, that's why.
I should go.
But the board's not crooked at all.
So he had to put off his schedule, so we know he's gone.
So,
So he'll be
what-
back, I think, the end of this.
okay, so the question would be, is he okay with the road? And the other question is he okay with the cistern? And then, if he had an opinion about where the dry hydrant should, where the hydrant for the cistern should be, to tell us. And then we care about his access from the water source to the homes.
Yep.
And then, ask him if he is concerned about maintenance of the cistern. And if so, does he trust the homeowners association to take care of that? Because, I don't know, some fire departments really like to be hands-on and care for their own hydrants and cisterns and all that, but, and I assume this would be a private road if it were built, and that the town would have an easement, to get up there and fire department to maintain the cistern.
Typically in here in Lyme, the department likes to have an easement allowing them to do maintenance for any of the fire ponds, especially when you have a dry hydrant. You get, basically you have a big piece in the center or a pipe that'll get filled up with silt. And being able to go in and use a truck to push all that out. It's important to set.
All right, so, do we wanna continue?
Yeah, no, I don't see anything, I mean, I think this looks like these are very believable lots.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna.
my impression is it looks
I'm not
good,
gonna be
but-
measuring every 1,000 feet, so rely on David to like tell us if the 4-to-1, I mean, there are 2 lots that are exactly at 4. So I imagine that's you can, measure away, but just to make sure that that is straight face, yeah, definitely the 4.
You got that, Dave? Okay. All right, so, any comments or?
No, I think what we had some other questions, that were in some sense predicated on approval of a 4-lot subdivision. Would you folks be willing to continue to talk about these things predicated on a four-lot, successful four-lot conventional subdivision. Because of course, we wanna talk about lot size averaging, we wanna talk about other things related to it, and this is simply the prerequisite to go there.
Essentially, kind of hypothetically,
Yeah,
if this were approved, what are there, just to kind of
I
iron
think
out our
what we need
next
to do is
steps.
close
Yeah, I
this
think we need to
hearing
close
and
this.
then continue it, and then let's talk about
Right,
it.
so I'd like to make a motion to
Yeah.
continue the hearing for the four-lot subdivision.
Send the application in here.
Is there a second?
Yep.
All right, all those in favor?
Time and date,
Um,
or date and time?
Well, what do we have?
You have the, so we're looking November 8th is the next meeting. Dow's will be here.
Okay, and that, I guess, could be lengthy, but we could have two lengthy things.
What did we consider, I'm sorry?
The 8th of November is the next meeting, and then the following Thursday would be Thanksgiving Day, so there is no meeting then. So you'll be then looking at the 13th of December is the one after that.
So would you like the November 8th? Okay,
I think so, yeah. I was just checking.
assume so. All right, so did we get a vote on that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we just didn't have a date.
okay. So did we do all those in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are all those still in favor?
Yep.
Okay, amazing consistency. All right, so,
Thank you, this looks.
yeah,
this
this
good.
is
Yeah.
really, it's great work that we can actually look at, and I mean, I feel from looking at it quickly, it's well done, so thank you.
Yeah, we followed all the same methodology and stuff, so I'm sure that we'll check out. If you end up having any questions or, things that we need to iron out, basically, just let me know. Try to get it worked out before the next one. And I apologize I didn't get it to you sooner. It's,
Well,
you know,
I mean, that's fine, I mean, you did your best, and we got it now, and we'll look at it. So how did, usually we would have scheduled an informal, what are the legal implications that we're discussing? We can just
It's
talk
other
about it.
business.
It's just other business.
All right, this
So
is other business.
Okay, is there any narrative associated with this resubmission that makes the narrative that you gave to us different, but for the 4 or 5 lots? Or should we throw that away?
I think that the original narrative, I think that's substantially the same.
Just a difference in lots, or are there any other implications, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that cover letter was requesting some of the things that I guess we were about to ask about, which was
Okay,
kind of like,
okay,
it was
okay.
kind of talking about how we might apply that conventional subdivision to lot size averaging, and how the criteria might be worked into potential.
I guess, one thing I want to say, if we're going to move on to it, is, I did submit a general plan for consideration to change the criteria for lot size averaging. So I want to be careful that, and we're going to be talking about that later, around midnight, I guess.
No, I have to leave at 8:30, so.
Oh, do you really?
I really do.
Oh.
Yep, I've got
Well,
a
some of us will be talking about
family
it.
member at home.
Okay,
and
some of us will be
a
talking
meeting at
about it
7:30
later.
in the
And,
morning,
So I want to be careful, because when we're working on something like that, we shouldn't, and it can't be for a particular project or person. But in general terms, we can talk about it, so I just wanted you to be aware of that.
So, again, the questions that we have here sort of presume the successful subdivision on the terms that we've had, and so, the next thing we wanted to be sure, we're sort of checking our understanding and what are the next steps for moving this forward, and so, I think the next thing is looking at once we've got the number of lots determined, are we correct in looking at the footprints, the lot coverage and all, and understanding that we could have up to, it's actually 20,426 square feet of building footprint split between the four buildings. This again is just a conventional 4-lot subdivision.
You
And
know,
so-
maybe the notes we took would be helpful for people,
Well,
just talking about these
okay,
numbers and things,
yeah.
it's
I
a
mean-
question.
Certainly, sure, I'll hand these out. This is just our, kind of our, keep one in.
Yeah.
Send the stack around, that's the right. I'm also referring to this chart of the 4 lots.
Oh, so your questions are based on these 4 lots being approved?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
right, I mean, I don't wanna be,
No,
as an engineer, it's too easy for me to get too hypothetical.
okay,
So, looking at question 2, 2A, the 20,426 is the sum of the building footprints shown in this chart, 2,622, 4,855, 5,949 plus 7,000. So, we could build homes there of those footprints.
As the zoning administrator, I'm gonna say no. If you handed me an application for buildings that size, I would look at the size of the lots that you created in your subdivision, the lot size averaging of those lots.
This is just the conventional subdivision to start.
Oh, it's just this okay,
Yeah.
that's, I'm
So
sorry. I
I'm
was-
just making sure our numbers are right. The lot coverage, the ordinance allows, the 12% lot coverage numbers are 15,700, 29,035, and 40.
No, it's all 26, it's maxed out at 26,000.
You're right,
for some.
thank you.
yeah,
Right,
yeah, that,
Right, well, right,
yeah, there's just one lot that you're less than,
Right.
yeah.
that's right.
So it'd basically be, whatever buildings you were trying to put on what lots would be allowed. You couldn't take and say, I'm going to take a building from lot 2, not build it and apply that footprint to lot 3.
Right.
In a conventional subdivision, yes.
Right.
Yep.
In any subdivision.
Okay. And gross floor area carries at 14,000 for all the lots. So the next question is, if we wanted,
Do they agree with 2?
yeah, actually, do you agree with, that's an
I
important
think
thing.
Assuming that David were to confirm those numbers, I think that's.
well, I mean,
Right.
again, it's, to get this, and
Sure.
it's pretty hard for me to
It's
answer
just-
those questions.
The way it's worded, it bothers me. You would be allowed whatever the dimensional controls for each individual lot, for the buildings on that lot.
Okay.
Adding them all up and saying, we have this much footprint for this conventional subdivision, is not,
It's per lot.
right, it doesn't,
Okay.
that
So-
number
so
doesn't, has no
but these
meaning.
apply, but, I mean, if these numbers check out, these numbers apply
Per each lot, right.
for each of those lots.
Yes.
I agree
Is
with
that,
that.
is that your point? I'm trying to understand what yours.
My point is, this, there's, it says building footprints is no more than 26,426 square feet of residential footprint split between 4 residential buildings.
But
that-
you're not having 4 residential buildings on one lot.
No.
You have 4, if approved, you would have 4 lots, each lot would have its own dimensional controls, and you would be allowed footprint for that lot based on those dimensional controls.
And I think that's the confusion about,
And
when you're talking
so when
about
you
lot
say you have
size
a
averaging,
total of,
you're averaging,
this-
you're putting them all
that may be
together
a
in a
number
single lot.
that adds up for all four, but you would not then take and say, well, this lot's a little bit smaller, but we're gonna split.
Right.
Right.
I got you.
You're definitely
That-
right.
that's-
You're
this-
right.
This
Absolutely.
one should be below number three, sort of.
Should-
Yeah.
This one leads you to believe that
Okay.
you're gonna take the aggregate of the total, split it by four, and apply it equally across the lots, and that's not how it would work, it would be
Right.
based on the
In a
dimensional
conventional
control.
subdivision, I absolutely agree, and it was confusing, so, I think that does lead into question three. So, under 511D7, it says the planning board may allow more than one residential building on a lot. And so, part of the question that we're getting to is, what is our, if we came and asked to cluster all that together, is there any reason?
I think, you know, this exercise is problematic, because like a question like that, I would have to go, you know, from my point of view, I'd have to go through all the implications to give you an answer.
Again,
I can't like look at this and go, yeah, oh yeah, sure, that would be fine, I don't know.
I think what we're trying to get to is in lieu of creating, these odd shaped pencil type, you know, lots that we were talking about last time, we would look to the board to potentially use that provision to allow all the buildings to be on a single lot, and the full 98-acre lot.
My criteria would be to look at what the criteria are for lot size averaging. And if that was consistent with that, then I would say I would be likely to, but I don't know that, there's no way for me to know that off the top of my head.
Well, also 7 is, we can do that, but the residential buildings approved under law averaging should be located within building envelope. So there's a little bit of discretion that we need to use in locating those buildings with regard to the overlay districts.
Yeah, there's a, I
So, I
mean,
mean, so possibly yes, but, you know, it tells us we need to look further, and it's just like not any buildings anywhere, so.
So in assisting the board in that decision, if we provided an approximate building envelope that we were looking at, would that help?
I mean, you could do that, but I think it's more likely that the board, going through the process of lot size averaging, would probably identify the envelopes that the board felt would be appropriate, and maybe there would be multiple choices, but it wouldn't, if you want to do that exercise, it certainly
Yeah, feel
couldn't
free.
hurt.
then I will also say the board, the lot size averaging does not give the board the right to change the ordinance and allow for a greater footprint that would be allowed on that 98-acre lot.
Right.
So, taking what you're allowed by the 4-lot subdivision, the planning board does not have the authority to say you can build these buildings based on this what you could do on this subdivision. As far as the number, yes. As far as the sizes, no. You would still be limited to what would be allowed for the lot itself.
Which is this one.
Yeah,
But as John said, we're discussing something, maybe change.
Well, I mean, what we're talking about is lot size averaging as it exists today. We are considering changing the criteria.
Right.
so,
Can I speak to that?
yeah, you want to? Sure.
Well, I was just, I think we had discussed it at the last hearing. I think the way that we would approach the issue you're talking about with the 7,000 square foot limit and the 26,000 square foot limit is that we would have to go to the zoning board and obtain special exceptions through 514D and 515E, which would allow the total building footprint approved by the planning board on one lot, but it's a special exception that allows them to modify the maximum, essentially. So we would propose to the zoning board that we add them all up, like Rich was coming up with the numbers, the 20,000 and the 93,000, and say, what we'd like to do is, you know, basically not develop a lot of this lot and provide a development in a clustered arrangement that impacts far less of the property and, but basically allows them to build the same number of buildings, the same approximate building footprint, the same lot coverage that they would be allowed if they were spread it out all over the place, but essentially concentrating it. We have to go to the zoning.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. That was
Yeah.
my next,
Yeah.
what I was about to.
Yeah.
And I think there's one other question, which is if we were to go to make a lot size averaging request and ask for the increased density, that takes 4 lots to 5, presumably we get an additional residential building. If we had a 5th lot, we get a 5th residential building. And then the rest of our question is, what are the dimensional controls on that 5th building? Presumably it'd be 14,000 square foot gross floor area. The footprint, the ordinance doesn't describe what the footprint of that building would be, and we would say that a reasonable thing would be the average of the allowed footprints of the other buildings.
I'd have to look at that more
Sure.
closely.
And then the same thing, what lot coverage is allowed for that increased, that bonus.
I'd have to
Right,
look at
and again, our thought would be, it would be fair to make it the average of the other lot coverages.
Okay.
So that's a question that we need a determination from you. You haven't had any time to think about it, so.
Well, we haven't had any time to think about it, and I think the other issue is, the first thing we would have to decide is whether the board wanted to grant the bonus lot. That's really, you know, kind of the
Right.
cart before the horse.
Well, I mean, I could envision an outcome, the board grants it, but says you can only have another 25 feet of footprint. I mean, I don't think you would do that, but I mean,
yeah,
at some point,
as
it is
an
important.
exercise, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I don't know off
Which
the
is
top of
why
my
I
head.
asked the question this way, to say, this is clearly important
Yeah.
for this process, and I wanted to get this question to you, so you can think
Okay.
about it.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's 3, question 3 does say cluster, and so,
Maybe Will could
right, would,
ask that.
Well, I mean, I think it's, what Liz was asking is, you know, what they really wanna do is cluster these buildings together, right? We keep talking about cluster. And I think the path that we're trying to get to is a way through the planning board and the zoning board to work within the ordinance to do that. And it seems like there's a path within the lot size averaging, within the special exceptions we just outlined, to do that, whether or not they get the increased density or not, that doesn't
Right.
really affect that, right? That would just allow them more building area.
If I understand what you're saying, I think I understand what you're saying, yes. That's my impression. This is an informal discussion, so, but that, I think I get what you're saying, and I think that's likely right.
Does this,
What does David think?
yeah, David, does this all, I mean, as the zoning administrator, I guess I'd like to,
My opinion is that you don't qualify for the increased density option because you are not doing you're not creating smaller lots. You're not really going that route, and when I read the incentive, as an incentive to conserve open space, the planning board may approve up to 25% more lots than would normally, round it up, than would otherwise be permitted. So the permitted lots would be the ones you are creating, the smaller lots. And since you are not going that route, then you wouldn't qualify for it.
well, we could go that route if we could get the zoning board to approve a special exception that would meet that type. I mean, it would be basically like a box around the buildings essentially, and then the remaining space would become open
And then
We've
like
space.
already created the 4 lots, using all
Right.
the property
Right.
that's there. That's, I think, what this envisions, is like, if you don't use all that property, I mean, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
But explain what you,
Well, in creating the 4 lots, they used all the property
Right.
on,
It's available.
that's available, so I think this says if you use less than all of the property, that's giving, creating more open space.
Right, so the conventional 4 lot is basically deeding all the property to individuals. They can do whatever they want on that property. If we do it the way that we're proposing, we cluster things together, just taking up a lot smaller space, and then essentially the remainder. If they were to go for the increased density option and do the 75% conservation easement, then I think the theory is, you're setting aside a lot more open space that can't be developed in any way in the future.
I don't understand how there'd be less development if there's a 5th building.
Well, there,
I mean, so, let me,
I mean, just
let me
like-
ask the question.
I mean, you're already using all the land to make the 4 lots,
Yes.
so it's already been used. And so if you, how are we getting more open space than we would if we allowed?
yeah,
I'm just trying to-
if we just
Walk
allowed,
me through that.
if we just allowed the 4,
Mm-hmm.
what is happening differently with you getting the 5th?
well, it would require them to conserve 75% of the lot, right? So they would have to deed it over to some organization or the town or something, so that nothing could happen to it, it could be used for whatever purpose, but, that's different than if you have a 4 lot conventional
Well-
subdivision, right? I mean, people can clear their whole property or do whatever they want to it.
They can do a lot more.
Right.
Was all that, I'm just trying to understand that 4 lot subdivision. When you say we used all the land, was it necessary to use all the land? I don't understand why it was necessary to use it all to create the 4 lot.
Don't ask me.
Yeah, I mean, we could've used, I suppose, a little bit less, but we couldn't create 5 lots out of it, so
So you put it on, so there's extra land on some of these lots, is correct?
There's more land that is
required by
explicitly
the law.
required by the ordinance, correct.
So I think that's the answer as to where the extra.
Okay, and then, so is the septic system, like the big septic system on here? And that would be in the conservation land, I mean, I don't know, but, I don't really see that here.
I mean, it hasn't been constructed.
I know, but it
right?
needs to be, right?
Um,
I mean, that would not be in open space conservation area, so.
Sure.
Well, I
But we
mean,
didn't- They
just
just would need to do 75% of the property, right?
Right.
So it wouldn't have I guess.
not including that, yeah.
Right, it probably wouldn't be able to include.
But
No.
it will also go back to 511B1, where the planning board, they're looking at what would be the most appropriate use of the land, the most efficient, what's going to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of the land.
Right.
And so that's really their decision, whether, when you look at this property, is there something special about it that preserving it is going to be benefit to the town? Whereas, that's, again.
It's a judgment call, basically.
Right, and I think, what we were hoping to get some feedback on as well, is what you would like to see from us to demonstrate that. I assume we would write a narrative that would essentially kind of hit on these points.
Well, I think on a practical basis, yeah, I mean, the more you could tell us, the better, but I mean, you're gonna have probably five people voting on this with, you know, maybe varying, you know, lenses, so it's hard to say what everybody might say or not say. But the point is, this is not lot size averaging is not a right. It's, you know, it's a different type of process, and, oh, this is just something you get by right.
Right, no, we understand that. I think I was just asking the whole board, you know, if there anything in particular.
You know,
that you'd
basically,
like to
what
see
I would
from us.
say, you know, to myself or anybody is, you know, you have read the section, and, you know, if it were me, I would put forth a narrative that supported it as best I could. That's what I would do.
Okay.
Anybody have additional? you-
Well, I guess just to circle back to David, because I guess we asked if you thought this path forward made sense, and I think we dove into the density, increased density option. Just that aside, I suppose, in terms of, you know, if the planning board were to approve the lot size averaging, and if the zoning board were to approve these special exceptions, is that this is the correct path that we're taking? I guess
Yes.
is what I'm-
I have no issues with going that route. I feel once, you know, the big issue I have is the aggregation of the footprint and lot coverages, you know, that's, but if the zoning board, you know, gives a special exception, which they are allowed to, or it's written in here that they may do, then, you know, that issue goes away. The planning board, if they, you know, approve the subdivision, you know, I have no issues with that. So I think the path is fine. The increased density option, I really don't see it working with the more than one residential building on a single lot, because there is no way of establishing any lot sizes for it, because you're not trying to create it. Whereas if you went the other route, said, okay, we have a 4-lot subdivision as a conventional subdivision, so we're going to create 4 small lots, here are those lots. We would like to have a bonus density lot, here is that lot. Here, you know, we now have numbers to work with. Going the other route, you're not creating that lot, so there's no base number to start working with. And so there's nothing I see in the ordinance that provides a way of getting there through 7. There's no, you know, if you did the lot size averaging, you got 4 small lots, then absolutely I see you going that route, but not for 7, because I don't see where you would get that number, and the ordinance, it does not provide anything to give you that number.
And so if we start, so just to take an example, so I can try to understand what you're saying, if we had, let's say, 50 acres of effective lot area on a parent parcel, you're saying that we could divide that into, let's say, 10 5-acre lots, and then we would make those smaller, and then add another one, and then the actual lines that we draw, we would have to recalculate the effective area and then calculate the building footprints from that.
Right. That's the way I read the ordinance. I don't see anything in there that says anything different, other than when you go to the section for footprint lot coverage, it says, you know, when you have a lot size averaging subdivision, the zoning board may approve larger sizes for those lots. But if you try to apply that bonus lot to item 7, there's no lot, there's no number for them to even start with.
So what is the incentive?
I think the incentive is to, again, if you're building a community of smaller houses on smaller lots, then the incentive is you would get an extra lot. So if
It's like, I remember at the Aging in Place meeting, before Michael Whitman bought his smaller house, that's what he wanted to do. And we spoke in general terms about it, and we talked about whatever it's called, I might remember, the something neighborhood.
Conservation
Pocket
Pocket.
neighborhood, with small houses for seniors all around, so I think that's what your, that sort of scenario is.
But you couldn't,
You couldn't build that,
Because,
because you can't have more than one residential building on a lot.
but if you had the lot size averaging, you could have small lots.
Well, and have you, I will assert that it's simply not economically feasible to do that in Lyme. That it doesn't.
Well, you're asking one question, and now the philosophical question. I thought you made a good point about that, which is why I introduced something to address that.
so, but let me step back, so if you own 100 acres, you have the choice of building 4 big houses, breaking up the 100 acres. Or you have the choice of building one house essentially, unless the ZBA gives you permission, and giving up all that other possibility to build. And I'm looking for, where's the incentive?
Build one house?
You,
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, you,
David is saying you can have the footprint for only one lot. So, I mean, I'm trying to make a little chart to compare.
I guess I'm confused by your question. You have the choice of keeping the lot whole and putting a,
No, subdividing it into 4.
well, no, you have 2 choices. You keep the lot whole.
If you're
But,
really rich.
Yeah.
Okay, right,
There are quite a few people who've done this.
right. But I'm not one of them.
Or subdivide.
Right,
And if you subdivide and, whatever you can do in a conventional lot, subdivision, if you want to,
if you wanna protect the property,
Yeah,
it's a
then you-
financial disincentive as far as I can tell from the zoning ordinance, that's what
well,
I'm trying to figure
I
out.
can't, I don't have the data to argue that, and so I won't argue that tonight,
Fair.
that,
And I think it's, I would just say that, I thought that Rich made a good point, and I'm interested in having a discussion with the board.
and the discussion, I think I know what you're speaking of.
What am I speaking of? Tell me.
I know, I was here at the last meeting.
Yeah, I introduced language,
Right.
and it's now different than what I thought of then. And later on in the evening, we'll be going over that. If we're all still awake.
Right.
So, anything else?
Do you have any other questions? Anything else?
Well, I know we have to go to the Conservation Commission at some point, and we're trying to figure out how to do it in one meeting instead of 2. You guys had mentioned that the last time.
What was the issue with the Conservation Commission? Dave? I don't remember.
They don't meet very often, is that a problem?
Yeah, they
Once
don't
a
meet
month
very
if we're
often.
lucky, right?
yeah, they meet the first Monday of the month.
Because of the driveway through the.
I think the driveway
wetland
through the wetlands.
Buffer.
Well, was that the only opinion, or was it more generally, what do you think of this idea?
I think it's just, is a you would need that for an approval if you're going to go through a wetland buffer. If you're gonna build, you would also need special exception from the ZBA.
But we need the Conservation Commission's
Right, they-
approval. That's
Well, you need their input.
It's
Yeah.
their input. So do they need to go to the zoning board for that?
Again, I haven't looked at the plans to see
Okay,
exactly where the
so
road, so I can't.
We're gonna,
Yes.
some of these
We
are
have it.
unanswerable questions at this
All right,
point.
Yeah.
all right.
We have an access way through wetland buffer.
So the access way through the wetland buffer would require a special exception from the zoning board, which requires input from the
That's
Conservation
okay.
Commission.
Yeah, the Conservation Commission doesn't approve or disapprove,
They just give them,
just input.
The zoning board just requires that we provide some kind of written documentation for that, basically.
Right. And then basically you would show them what you wanna do, and they would, and then Blake has done enough of these that he's very familiar with writing a letter to the zoning board with what the board has, or what the Conservation Commission has discussed.
okay? Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody not have one of these who needs it?
Big ones?
You have yours?
I have plenty of paper at home, I'll use David's when I.
Okay. You want more pages? Everybody's got what they need?
I'm gonna keep the extras in my desk anyway, so.
Yeah, all right, so I don't, what do I do? I have this one, or is this yours? Or this?
Helpful for us to stay, will the minutes reflect what you guys are gonna talk about on
And you're
Monthly's
welcome to stay.
advertising?
Yes, they will.
Okay, so I don't have to stay.
No, you don't have to stay.
Okay.
But if you would like to, you're absolutely
Thank
welcome.
you,
Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to move on to the minutes. Does anybody have minute issues or minute issues?
Can I help you read it?
I think we got it.
There we are.
You want typos?
Yes, there.
Everything you got.
Page 3, third paragraph from the bottom. Applicants believe that they're
Thank you,
laying,
Will.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Page 3, third from the bottom.
I think it's a typo. Applicants believe that their laying met this requirement, so meet.
Doesn't matter. Could do either, couldn't you?
I don't know.
Was it?
No, because it should be.
Oh, lighting meat, yeah, no, you're right.
No, big.
No, that's
That's
important.
crucial, right? Page 4, item number 4.
I think that should be meets this requirement.
Meats, not met?
Your lighting meets.
Okay, we have a meats and a met. Do people like meats or met?
Yeah, put an S on it,
Met, people
yeah.
are going for meats.
Well, I agree, meets,
Meets it.
because that's present instead of past tense.
Right.
They certainly think that it still does meet the requirement, right?
Correct.
Correct.
All right, what else you got?
Page 4, second, item 4, second to the last line. S, put an S on buildings.
Which one? Where? Will be able to construct buildings. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, and the only other thing I had was, that wasn't a typo, page 3, I guess third paragraph down. Tim stated that if the cost was excessive, then the board should reconsider having changes made. Somebody threw out the number $3,000, and I think what I was trying to say, I mean, maybe it doesn't even
Tammy
change.
said that.
Yeah, I was just saying that I thought the $3,000 was excessive, but if it could be done for less, this would be less, then I would be in favor of
All
it.
right, so tell David how you want to phrase.
Let's see. Tim can say that if the cost of $3,000 was excessive, if the new plan could be done for around, well, if the new plan could be done for considerably less than that, then he felt that it should be done. Is that, maybe you can clean that up a little bit.
Why don't,
I haven't written, I mean, I can write something out.
Why don't-
Yeah, if you wanna write something and send it to me.
Yeah,
Right.
okay,
so is the board willing to approve
Trust me.
the unwritten, the 500 pages that Tim is surreptitiously gonna add, that will,
okay.
it's fine with me. Is that fine with everybody? Yeah, all right.
Well, there's this one statement here, Vicky felt that it was important to have a correct updated plan and believed that the board should not be considering the cost. And it's kind of like, I believe that the applicant can come up with a lesser cost approach to
Well, I think that's
updating the
what
plan.
that's what Tim was getting at too.
Yeah, so, I mean, she could trace it and then put the changes on. I mean, all I wanna do is have like, what do we have? A
So
snapshot
what
for
if we
today.
just said that both Vicky and Tim felt that there was a cheaper
That it was
avenue?
important to have an updated plan,
Right,
and,
and we thought it could be done at a reasonable cost, or hopefully. it could be
Well,
done at a reasonable
you wanna give Dave, don't have David guess at what you wanna say.
Vicky, Vicky felt that it was important to have a correct and updated plan, and believed that the applicant could update one at a reasonable cost. That,
Yeah,
cross
we could
out your
say,
thing?
yeah, or you could just say Tim and Vicky.
Why don't you say Tim and Vicky?
Okay, okay.
Have we learned how to voice your opinion now? See, Eric wanted an updated plan. Rusty did not.
That's okay, Rusty doesn't need to want an
Well,
updated plan.
I think
I
it's,
see,
He
okay,
can be the
there it is.
select board member
it's
going,
not
I
an
don't know
update-
what was
I got an
approved.
updated plan, my updated plan was the penciled cut over to over.
All right, let's
Yeah.
not, these are the minutes, not the discussion, so let's get through the minutes.
Devin could update the, I lost track.
I can't imagine why. All right, Tim and Vicky felt that.
Yeah, I
It
get
was
that part.
important to have a correct and updated plan and believe that the applicant could update the plan at a reasonable cost.
whatever reasonable is, but yeah.
Well, it's different for everybody, isn't
Right.
it?
Yes.
And the
Oh,
3,000.
that I got,
Oh, you got it?
I got it.
Okay, so any other changes? All right, all those, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended by everybody. By Tim, Vicky,
As amended.
as amended, okay. We don't have to say who?
Second.
Okay, a second, all those in favor? All those opposed, okay. So, the next thing is the regional planning. This really, we don't really need to get into this very deeply. We have this feedback, and I thought that we were gonna have her come in, but that hasn't been scheduled. So can we schedule that and get her
Well,
in? So,
I thought that it would be helpful if the board went through this and identified any questions they had so that she would be prepared to answer
Right.
questions. Having her just come in,
okay, well,
I think
all right,
just-
here's one question. And I'm not sure about, whether this is the case, but it looked to me like she included areas outside of the Lyme Common District as if they, zoning wise, as if they were extensions of the Lyme Common District, and I wanted to get some.
I was wondering about that myself. There were a couple of the lots that,
Yeah, the one part of it was in, and then the rest.
Yeah,
of
and it
was
seemed
out.
like she assumed that because it was partially in, that qualified it as an extension.
I saw that also. And
Yeah,
when you look at some of her maps, you have a couple of really big lots that are that go out to Dorchester Road. And even looking at that, I had other concerns with those as they were, when you look at topologically, they are not reasonably accessible.
it looks suspect.
So, having some local knowledge of the lots
Right.
makes you look and say, I don't think you could get the potential that has just because of the fact that it was steep slopes.
So,
Should we all send our comments to David?
okay,
Yeah, I think
I
you,
mean,
All right, so,
I read this a month ago when we got it, and haven't.
So, yeah, so let's send our comments to David, and then he can pass them on to Megan, and then she can come and,
it's Olivia.
Olivia.
oh, sorry, Olivia.
Yeah, and then, I just think it would, you know, having the questions up front is going to aid her in being able to answer them. You know, walking into a meeting cold and being blindsided by questions that you're not prepared for is just very difficult, and I would rather,
Yeah, okay,
Well, I mean, if we've, you know, if we're identifying one now that is potentially major,
yeah, I'd say it's major.
if, well, why don't we ask her to, if she's able to, I mean, are you able to ask her if she's willing to run the numbers again with that edit? I mean, because some of these areas do look like it's worth doubling the area of
Yeah.
the common district.
Yeah,
Which is not gonna give us an answer that's helpful.
well, I don't know, why don't we, it probably makes a good idea to just have one,
yeah, I would prefer
Rounded
to send it,
input.
yeah, just, here are the questions that the board has,
Right.
and
Right.
yeah,
we'd like to
Yeah,
have
she
you come.
needs to prepare, because they're
Yeah.
prepared.
okay.
So are you gonna try and get together a set of questions next meeting?
No, next meeting's gonna be very busy
That's true.
between this Pinnacle project and
So-
continuing
That
Right.
would be the December meeting,
meeting.
if she could make that, okay? The next thing is coming out of the Dow's meeting. I thought it'd be a good idea just to go over that section of the site plan review. And one thing, at least from my point of view, I don't wanna do is get into a discussion about Dow's, because it's not noticed, they're not here.
I need to keep my blood pressure really low because I have a family member at home. Okay?
So do you wanna leave now?
No, I don't wanna, I do wanna leave now because, I don't get to see my niece often at all.
Okay,
And knowing that you have yeah, so, yeah, but what, is there a so why are we
yeah,
talking about this? Okay.
because it came up in there was in the discussion, there
Okay.
was, a lot of disagreement about what was in there, what it means, and I just thought we should clarify it, and the board should have an opinion as a board about what it, you know, what it wants to do.
What section?
Lighting.
So, let me just,
No, it's in the site plan review.
let me just update
Page 13.
the board with, the discussion and the actions of the select board, so that
Yeah.
you're up to date on
Okay.
where the select board is on this issue. There seemed to have been some question as to whether the select board was overstepping its authority, and so we sought legal opinion with
Mhm.
regard to that. And this is a copy of the notice that we just went over this morning, the legal opinion as to.
I don't know why tonight is a thing where everybody hands out stuff that we could have gotten before to actually look at, but, okay.
I'm gonna take it and read it, it's not hard.
Well, you know what? It's how is theirs dark sky design? Yes, if you do enforce, but are you telling me those are sharp cutoff fixtures?
Okay, I'm gonna stop this,
Okay.
for the sake, please, for the sake of your blood pressure.
Yeah,
And, you know,
that's a
my
true
response
statement.
is that, I mean, I've read a lot of the RSA's about the select board. The select board has extraordinarily broad authority. So, if this is the point of view of the, our lawyer, so be it. It doesn't change our responsibilities to interpret the ordinance as we see fit.
It doesn't say that either.
No, so I'm just saying my response is, you as a select board can do whatever you want. I mean, literally whatever you want, the way no, I mean it. I mean, your powers are just, it's like an and I think one of the issues is, you know, is it an imperial select board or a select board that is, you know, more cooperative? But if that's the avenue you choose to go through, that's your choice and you're entitled to it. My feeling is that my responsibility on this board is to interpret the existing laws in these ordinances as I see fit. And then you can do what you want.
I'd also say that document is completely useless without the original question.
Yeah, I'd also like to see
Yeah,
the question.
That doesn't tell you anything without what was the original question.
What was the question?
Did the select board overstep?
Was that the exact question?
I
I'd like to, well, I don't want to assume,
Yeah,
I'd like to know
like I
what
say,
it
I just,
says.
without seeing the original question, it really doesn't.
It's interesting
I'd like to see the question.
that we're talking about, and we're calling things that aren't a way, and it's antithetical. What is being approved as being consistent with our standard.
Well, that's really not addressing the issue. The issue legally is whether the select board has the authority to
I'm not
to do
questioning that, they do have the
It's good.
authority to
Yeah.
enforce.
Or not.
or not enforce.
Right.
But to determine, I mean, what they've done is they've not enforced, because
Right, but that,
they have not determined that the lighting is
but
compliant,
that's
because
not,
there's no way
I don't
that's
think there's an
compliant.
argument about that. They're saying they don't want to enforce it.
Right, and so I would prefer to say, we can choose not to enforce it, fine, and if you're not gonna enforce it there, we should remove this and
No,
let's.
I disagree. I
Well,
don't think we should remove it.
Then why should anybody else who comes before us be required to
Well, I'll
have
tell you
sharp
why
cutoff
not,
fixtures?
because if, and that's one of the
Tim's
problems.
not special.
If, one of the, hold on, if the
Tell me.
problem with that is that every time that, once this precedent is set, every time the select board chooses not to enforce something, then we go ahead and take it out of the ordinance. No, I mean, I would like to think at least that there's a considered, there's an effort of consideration as to why they're not enforcing it. If they have the discretion to do that, and I would just hope it's not abused. But my response is certainly not to change the ordinance because a specific select board doesn't want to enforce it.
Right,
Because this was voted on with the chairman at the time of the select board voting for it. I didn't vote on it, Vicky didn't vote on it. Most of the people who voted aren't on the current board. And the chairman of the select board voted in favor. So anyway, I would like to see the question. Could you forward that to everybody on the board?
See, I have to get it, I don't think I
But
can.
will you do that?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, it happens a lot, where we don't, but I mean, I thought the question was fairly clear.
no, it's
there.
not. The
Well-
question will be clear when I read it.
Okay.
And in terms of, I have a very different reaction than Vicky, which, you know, Vicky's saying, well, we should take it out. I think anything, I mean, that's one of the reasons I want to look at it, is, you know, if we look at it and as a board say, well, that's unreasonable, fine. Then the board can choose to take it out, but not in response to a specific select board's discretionary choice not to enforce.
So this is, remember, this is not, you know the original select board that decided this, right? Because this is not the select board that I was sitting on, who made this original determination. The only thing that has been stated in this select board is that they're gonna stand by the original select board.
Well, no, I don't buy that, because that's passing the buck.
No, it's,
This select board has a choice to enforce or not. Yes,
the past select board had that choice and made that choice, and
right,
this select board.
you're a different select board.
And
You
this
are,
select
you
board-
are entirely free to make your own choice.
I understand, And I'm telling you that we have done that, and I've communicated that to you 3 times now.
So it's not an issue about a past select board. This select board has chosen not to enforce it. That's accurate.
If we have an effort to alleviate some of the contentious issues here, I do believe that there is room to make some changes here that have been communicated. But if you want to stick by your, this
Well,
and
you know,
then,
Rusty,
I'm just telling you.
no, that's completely changing the subject.
No.
Yes, it is.
It's not the
It
comments
is
you made
changing,
earlier.
it is changing the subject from the select board choosing when to enforce. And in terms of being willing to change, I am willing to consider changing it, but not as a result of the select boards choosing what they want to enforce. So, that's over. What I wanted to do was discuss, there is somewhere in here,
Can I add one thing? I think there's a difference between the previous select board deciding not to enforce it and the current select board choosing to respect the first select board's ruling.
and what is the difference?
To maintain and or uphold a decision made by a previous select board is different than making that decision in the first place.
And if that decision, I would say that if that decision.
I'm not saying I agree with either one of those decisions.
Well, I disagree with you.
Well, it's also a matter of,
I think
of
the standard of.
alternative facts, I mean, that's
It's like
the
the standard of
problem.
appeal is different once the initial ruling has been made. But
I don't agree.
that's a matter of.
Because you could, if that was the basis of why it's okay or not okay, you could say that the planning board having issued a ruling, that shouldn't be changed.
Yeah, no.
Because it was based on a 4-to-1 vote by members who, for the most part, are not on this board anymore.
Because if a
What are
former
we talking about?
planning board made a mistake in their decision-making, I'm not gonna uphold their
Exactly.
bad decision, okay? I'm
Just
gonna
because it was made.
interpret the
I didn't say I
regulations
agree
and
with either one of those.
do
decisions.
what
I
I
agree
think
with
is
either one of
right.
those decisions.
So I'm not, so I'm kind of disappointed in our select board not attending to plain language and, it's not a difficult interpretation.
I think the point made in the email is that the citizen can rely on a decision that was handed down on the prior site plan review as done and over with, and only the issues related to the change that's being applied for is open for reinterpretation here. And you can choose to deal with new lights and make your ruling accordingly. But with regard to the lights of the old site plan review, that issue has been dealt with and is.
Well, that's what she's saying here.
That's exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I can read that. So I would like to see the question, you're gonna send that. So, I'd like to put an end to that part of the discussion, and I think it's 11.16. 11.161, exterior lighting shall be dark sky design, sharp cutoff, and installed and operated in such a way that adjacent residential uses are suitably protected.
I think what we should do is we should, Vicki, you said there's a certification board that certifies fixtures as being dark sky or whatever, we should refer to their standards, because this is a little vague.
The term
Right.
dark sky, I mean, you
It's-
could
it's
put a
actu-
registered trademark.
it's actually
after
But
that.
we should say dark sky,
Registered trademark.
registered,
Yeah, because that's what the name of the
whatever,
organization
as,
is.
you know, as
It's
judged.
really not that hard. I mean, let me
Because
separate.
that makes it clear that it's not a judgment call on anybody's part, right? Bring in the certification, good to go. You
I
don't
think
have
we
to
should
do
be, more specific.
Well, the approved plan shows that they're sharp cutoff fixtures.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the
there-
problem.
it's not
I
that
know, I'm
hard,
talking about
it's
that
not
thing,
that
okay,
hard
we're talking
to,
about
I went, this has not been like a major interest of mine. But I went and looked up on, you've all heard of the internet, on the internet, dark sky lighting, sharp cutoff, and, it's pretty clear what it is.
I mean, our dark sky, are dark sky and sharp cutoff, do they have a different meaning? Or are they,
Actually, they're related.
they're related,
Yeah.
but so,
Yeah,
that's why I
are
think
they-
this should be,
you-
this, I think this should be clarified, the standard should be clarified, because it's not.
All right, so
really
there are two
clear
things. I
what this
think
means.
if we can make this as clear as possible, that's fine. There's the ability to waive anything for good reason in these regulations. So if there are times in the town where it doesn't make sense to have that type of lighting, it can be waived. But I think in general, we want the language to be as clear as possible.
So David, in the original site plan review that we approved for them 2 years ago, whatever it was, how was it worded just the lighting would be
It
dark
was-
sky?
Well, the word dark sky and the light fixture cut sheet that they provided was not the lights that they used.
So they came in and said we're gonna use these
They
lights.
provided a cut sheet for lights.
For dark sky lighting.
And they did have dark sky in quotes on the
Right,
one
and
that
they
brought in.
didn't use the new lights.
And they didn't use it.
They didn't use them.
Okay.
So it's a little unfortunate. So is there a volunteer who would like to work on the language? I mean, you, Vicky, you probably know this stuff better than anyone.
Art already, I think, did another lighting proposal for our site plan regulations a couple of years ago. And, so maybe we could resurface that
Okay.
and see what we want of that or whatnot.
All right.
So, yeah, Tim has it.
Is this it?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that the word? Okay, purpose intended.
All right, we
Okay, but we don't need to.
we don't need to
but
go through
that's-
that now.
I think it's already been researched and you guys can just, look at that and
Okay.
chop it up.
So, moving on, the zoning amendment, the lot size averaging, everybody got that?
Yeah, can I'm gonna have to leave,
Okay.
and so, I can't find the email that has the dates for the joint meeting with resilience.
Could you send that to Vicky again?
Right, and
So those are all afternoon.
All afternoon, okay.
And
They're all
Rusty,
afternoon.
you said you could go on the 29th. Is that the only day you could go?
3 days, gave them 3 days.
You,
Yeah, those are the 3 days I read. No, I think you only gave me 1 day.
I thought you only had the 29th.
I think
Getting a different meeting
Sue said,
confused here.
I know Sue said she could go on 29th.
No,
I had
but
the
Sue gave
29th,
extra
but-
days as well.
And I think you only gave me the 29th as a,
Okay, I have to look back at that, but I
Yeah,
thought,
you have any day but the 29th,
The evening, that's not evening anyway.
birthday, yeah.
So these have to be, these are all
John can't,
afternoon.
oh, John can.
I could go any day.
That's right, because Trudeau canceled.
Trudeau canceled my appointment.
Well,
Um,
Yeah, I don't have to
I'm
propose
late
dates.
to- these are all afternoon meetings as proposed?
Yeah, then we don't know whether they would ultimately be here or.
actually, I think I'm sending everything
in
to
Plymouth.
Gmail account for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know where that, I saw it earlier today, and then I just didn't have time to sit down and look at my schedule. So, but the problem is that, in order to get the regional planning commission numbers on each of those slides, I have to write up a thing. These are the numbers I need, and I haven't had a chance since Tuesday to sit down and do that, because I haven't had night meetings every night, so this is, so I don't
Okay.
know how fast they're gonna be able to respond to that, so that we would have the
Yeah, I
information to
don't
give to
know.
them.
But,
So- But anyway,
so you're gonna communicate?
just send me the dates again, please, and I'll get
Yep.
back to you with. what
I'll
my
just re-forward you the
schedule is.
email that has all of.
So everybody else has responded? Yeah? Did you?
David?
I haven't yet.
Okay, but you'll do that?
and then
Okay.
wasn't
And
there some-
frankly, I would, if I can't come, fine, I'll just pass the amended slide. Are you gonna go?
If it's before 4 o'clock, I can, but
Okay, well, I'll.
He hasn't, David hasn't been going to any of these.
Oh, yeah, so I'll just get
It's
my,
one meeting, isn't it?
You wanna send them to me?
I'll send them to you,
Okay.
yes.
But wasn't there something said at the meeting about November 5th? Something was gonna
Monday.
happen. Something was gonna happen by November 5th, and if we had a meeting before that, it was gonna be hard. What was that, remember? They couldn't get
Well,
something
no,
ready by
it
the
was
5th.
because of the election is coming up.
On that's why
6th.
Rusty couldn't,
Yeah.
that's why we couldn't meet on the
Be
6th
at the-
Okay.
for the
But I
LCDC.
thought there was something that Chris was saying that he wasn't gonna be able to be ready until the 5th, and then.
I mean, it might have been, but
I
I
mean,
don't.
I gotta
don't
say
recall.
that I think that Monday, the 29th is this coming Monday. Is everyone really gonna
No,
have?
I don't think
we're
that's
gonna be ready
practical.
by then.
But
I guess
they
that's
gave-
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
They gave a
So-
date. Yeah, I don't think it's practical, but. Okay, so we're done with that. Let's go on to the
Sorry.
zoning amendment.
Yeah.
Everybody has their zoning amendment language? You have yours? Because I'll look on what yours I left.
Oh, this, a lot of land, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I sent. So, yeah, so people's thoughts, comments?
Well, I guess I would say that, I think instead of having percentage, I think it would be better to have an actual number.
I agree.
For the footprint.
Or let's wait till David gets back.
This is a new one now, not the one we looked at the other day. So David sent another one out?
It's this one.
It's this one.
It's the email from David, unless there's something, you know. This is the question.
I'm just looking for a date to see, so. 16. This changed from what you handed us something at the last meeting, right?
I think I said something.
Yeah, I think you read it.
David
I read
sent,
it.
David sent this out.
Yeah, nothing else has been
That's what I
sent.
thought. I thought I saw something, yeah, I didn't see it. Okay.
Just like my emails from David, they vaporize. Yeah, they did. They totally,
In the cloud.
they.
So anyway, what I was gonna say was, I think it would be better to have an actual number, or a percentage. And in thinking about it, for the, gross floor area, I think somewhere around 3,000 square feet would seem reasonable to
I
me.
agree.
So for what number?
Somewhere around 3,000 square
For
feet
which?
for the gross floor area. I mean, it seems like that would allow a big enough house.
Didn't you both have, sorry, didn't you both have language last time?
Yes, his was the
Yeah, but I-
planned development, but he abandoned
I
it.
abandoned it.
Okay.
So I guess what that would mean is that we would allow, let's say it was 3,000 square feet, we would allow that for whatever size lot, lot size average. Is that right?
Well, my point of view would be, these are for the reduced lots.
Right.
And the thing that struck me when we went, when we had the discussion with Rich, and assuming the numbers were right, that I think it was like 1,900 square feet.
Well, it would only allow, on an acre, it would only allow 871.
Yeah, so, but, and on a particular one, it was like 1,900. So it just seemed like the purposes of this, of the lot size averaging section is to encourage clustering to fulfill the criteria that it wants to promote. And for people who wanna build larger houses, like 3,000 square feet, it should encourage them to cluster. I don't wanna particularly, and I don't think it's necessarily consistent with that section to provide those advantages to 4,000 or 5,000 square foot houses.
Right, yeah.
It seems that you have, because you're reducing your lot sizes, the lots are not capable of supporting, houses of.
That are humongous.
Right.
Right, yeah, you do need to provide for septic,
Right.
you need to provide for well, you need to, and I think that, if you have a, system where it's a joint system, that's fine and wonderful, but you're no longer preserving, assuming that that's going on, the remainder property, you're not preserving that property anymore. You're taking.
Well, yeah, I'm not addressing any specific,
Right, well, what I'm saying is that if you are doing a lot size averaging subdivision, those lots should be able to
to
support
support, yeah,
the,
the use.
the use.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting that you can't use the reserves land for things like septic and wells?
I would think that you're developing that land that you're supposed to be preserving.
Well, you're allowed to use 25% of it, right?
Up to,
Up to.
well, no, what are you talking, that's the
No, that's
axle.
right.
Huh.
Well,
The
no,
other
you have,
question
you
that-
have to preserve up to 75%.
And the other question I have is when you do reread the,
You have to preserve no less than 75.
Well, that's for increased density.
Right,
That's-
I
that's
believe
for lot
Increased
size
density.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I believe
but
you
one may
have
want a
to-
lot size average without increased
Yeah,
density.
you don't necessarily get the increased
You
density.
may want clustering it
Yeah,
out.
but I believe that if I remember right, in the lot size, under 4, where the planning board approves reduced lot sizes, it shall designate an area equivalent to the reductions in lot sizes set aside as open space.
Right.
And
Right,
to me,
that's
you're
right.
not really setting aside, if you have a well or a septic, you need to maintain that.
But, so could they, on the remainder land that isn't set aside, I guess that's a question to consider.
Well, if you have a 5-acre lot,
Yeah,
and you say, I'm going to do a lot size averaging lot of 1 acre. The remainder is 4 acres, so you need to set aside 4 acres for open space.
Right.
Right.
And some sort of easement.
And well, it's not, just,
I mean, zoning easement, right?
but which.
the board may require a zoning easement or permanent
May.
conservation easement.
Yeah,
Well, if they get a bonus lot, then it is required to have a real conservation easement.
Right,
yeah, but we're talking about regular LSA without that.
But what I'm saying, I think that there's more to it than just the building footprint, that you need to
Yeah,
account for.
I think the three criteria are the gross floor area, building footprint, and lot coverage.
Right, but let's say you approve a lot. It needs to have a space for septic, or at least some provision for a septic. It needs to have a well that's 75 feet, or if you're going to provide a community well, you need to make sure that that meets state requirements, so it's,
Well, you said you were gonna look into the state requirements?
yeah, I haven't done it.
But David, what if, just specifically, what if, say you had 40-acre lot, and you had you could divide into 6 lots, but you wanted to cluster
Yeah.
with lot size averaging. So you could put 6 houses on 5 acres, right?
Mhm.
Conceivably,
Or
right.
4 acres even, and you could still get, even if each house had a well, you could probably still do that in septic.
Well, that's what
Whatever the
that's what I'm
minimum.
trying to get, to make sure that you're not reducing lot sizes down to a point where
You couldn't do that.
you can't, the lot can't support.
So,
You know, there is no city water, there is no
Right.
Right.
city
So
sewer,
we could
so.
add, languages that the planning board shall not create lots that, of reduced size that will not support the use.
But I also think you need to be clear that if you're going to allow, a joint septic or a joint, well, to supply everything, that be, either located in, and again, open space, that to me is, a space
Right.
that is not developed.
Right,
Right, well, yeah, it would have to be in the lot size averaging area, right?
Well, that's up to the board, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed, to be able to say,
so where the
if
septic.
you wanna allow it in the open space area, so be it, that's fine, it doesn't matter to me at all.
Right.
It just,
It has to be addressed.
I feel it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, but, yeah.
All right, so where the septic and well can go, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Let me add, just as a thought process of that. The drilling of a well out in an open space, is that in any way, I don't know, against the use of open space? I mean, once the well is drilled, you put the cap on it, I mean, isn't it?
again, that's the board, how they,
It's a determination we would have to make.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
but you do need to maintain the, access to it. Because if you ever need to pull that pump, you need to maintain the line. If you need to pull up for, because of a water line break or to replace wiring.
Right, so in those circumstances, you don't think it qualifies as open space?
No, I don't, because you need to, you can't just let it go natural, or you do have to do something to maintain that.
So we would need to include language that addressed that specifically.
And like I said, it doesn't matter,
Right.
I agree with you.
In the leach field, I look at this thing and it's like every so often you might have to go out and touch it, but for the most part,
But
it's open space.
I think where we, I mean,
Yeah,
we,
but you can't drive on the leach.
we can address that, but when it comes to state stuff, we need to know where we would start getting into trouble.
Yeah.
So if you can let us know, that'd be good. So,
And the other, it does matter because if you have a well that's supplying a certain number of residences, the state has certain requirements. And it really depends, then if you have a well that is a single residence, you need to maintain 75 feet from the septic system. I think if you're going up to a quote, public water supply, it goes up to 150. But at what point is it considered public, and that's, is where I
yeah,
need to.
so that's what we need that input from the state.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's what I would suggest. I'd really like to have this ready to go to the town in March. We got a pretty busy schedule coming up. Could everybody who's interested, I mean, maybe some people just are not interested in this or wouldn't vote for it, but for those who are interested, why don't you use this, or if you choose not to, fine, but you could use this as a starting point and put in your own numbers, and then we can hash it out, and we can figure out the septic and well stuff.
And that would be lot coverage.
Well, there's three things.
Right, I mean, septic and well would be,
Are people willing to do that?
I mean, I think the point of this whole thing is to not force somebody, or I should say to let somebody put houses, bigger houses closer together, cluster bigger houses, not force people to
Disperse them.
disperse them all
Yeah.
over a big area. And the way it's written now, it isn't practical to do that.
It makes it,
Well, there are the special exception provisions in here.
yeah, I mean, I suppose, we could just rely on those.
So it's a question of whether we wanna state it clearly, and even then, suppose we put 3,000 feet in here or whatever,
Yeah,
someone could still go apply for a special exception for
Right.
4,000 feet.
To the ZBA.
The ZBA.
But of course, yeah, I mean, this sort of helps the ZBA.
It does,
The
yeah,
dumping
yes.
on the ZBA,
I guess it gives it more guidance.
and we could, I mean, if we're setting specific standards for this, we can exclude this from
Special exception.
the special exception. I mean, we could just leave it so that people have to go to the zoning board. But this seems more straightforward. And the other thing, you know, one of the things that I took away from the conversation when you were here was the lot size averaging is such a discretionary section. And having the ability to have some firm figures that the planning board feels okay about, and that's consistent with the what's being promoted in this section, seems like a benefit both for the planning and zoning board and for the applicants, so that there's a level of certainty, potential. It's not, I mean, potential certainty. So, any other comments? So, how many people are interested in this? Because it's hard to tell. Okay, so we're all interested, so will you all work on this? And we have a lot going on. And I'd really like to see this not get bumped to next year. Okay?
Yeah. And what's the date that you have to have it for a town meeting?
Well, it has to go to town council, so.
Yeah, basically, the final time that you have, if you called the special meeting to have, because you have to have a public hearing, would be around the first week of February.
Yeah,
I don't
so,
know.
but we have, basically the rest of this year is pretty shot in terms of getting
You have 2 meetings the rest of this.
2 meetings the rest of the year, and they're pretty full. So we might get a little bit of time just to pass out our different versions, but we're not gonna be able to get substantially into it until January. Which-
And I foresee current projects flowing into January.
Flowing is, yes, so that's why I don't wanna lose this. So let's, within the context of our responsibilities to the applicants, let's push this forward. We're not gonna get anywhere with the senior
I was
housing
gonna say,
article
we
this
have
year.
to, probably have to table,
What,
we probably have to table this one.
does the senior housing, yeah, there's no point. First of all, that might as well wait until the consultants give us whatever's gonna happen with them. And we're never gonna get that done this year. But this, I think we can get done this year. All right? Anybody else have any desire to stay here any longer? All right, I'll make a motion to shut things down. Second? All right, all those who are still here?
Great.
Thank you.